Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be talking about Nikki and Dan Phillippi once more, mainly because if you haven't seen my last video, I will link it down below. But they were in the headlines basically because they decided to put down a dog that was healthy and well because the dog allegedly attacked their child. Turns out the child was taking away food from the dog, pestering the dog, so it wasn't an attack as much as a response in most people's point of view. I'll link that down below though if you want to hear more about that. Since that has come out, more about the couple has come out and people have been noting things that have been going on through the years that may have garnered criticism but not enough to actually have any kind of consequence, if that makes sense. So I wanted to go through a couple of the things that people were commenting on that they found issue with. So one of the big things that has been circulating on the internet is adoption related things. So they initially wanted to adopt from Thailand, and basically they made a video explaining why they were no longer adopting from Thailand. I'll put a couple clips, but I suggest watching the whole video regardless. It was very strange because apparently the agency mentioned that for a year you could not show your child on social media and that you couldn't talk about your child on social media. Basically for a year you weren't allowed to talk about it.
Is this basically just saying like not to share any information about our future child until they're officially ours? Because I didn't say this, but I'm like, that's what I deemed like common sense. Like when we get matched with a kid and we have the picture and the information, I wasn't planning on sharing that just because who knows, that kid may end up not being our kid and then they could be with someone else and we didn't want to like violate someone's privacy that isn't like our kid. That sounds weird, but you get what I'm saying. So I asked her that, and she was like, well, yes, but also Thailand has its own law that's unique to it that after you pick up your child and they're your child, you are not allowed to talk about them or share any images, photos, videos, anything about them online for a year.
Yeah, and that...
So,
I mean, Nikki's got a YouTube channel where we share a whole lot.
Wait, hold on. When that hit, we literally were like,
yeah.
What? Like, we literally were like, wait, what? So we're like going around the house. We're like trying to figure out how this could work. Like, hashtag baby blur face.
Yeah,
like, what are we gonna do? Dan's like, maybe we could deal with that for a year. And we're talking about it and we're like, all right, let's pray about it. Let's sleep on it, and then let's see how we feel in the morning.
It's not just a rule that Thailand it's not just a rule that Thailand has, like, oh, you can't share anything or talk about your kid for a year. It's that the adoption is not finalized until a year later.
Yeah.
So, the kid's gonna be living at our house for a year, and it's that whole time not our kid. So. Yeah. Not okay with that either.
Yeah, so we slept on it. I told a couple of people in my life, like a couple close friends, my assistant Melissa, because she's like super logical, and she responded being like, dude, like what if there's an accident or something? And Holt actually said to us, like, you need to take this policy really seriously because you could mess up Holt's relationship with Thailand and you could mess up future adoptions for families that are waiting in line in process with Thailand.
Now, I'm not an adoption expert by any means. To me, it was strange that that would be kind of a reason to not adopt, even though they are kind of a vlog channel, though it's lifestyle as well. I thought, like not showing a child for a year would probably be difficult if you're doing videos of like a day in my life, blah, blah. But there's also editing. There's also a partner that can take care of your child while you're filming. So, like that to me didn't seem like a deal breaker. Obviously, that's a personal choice. On the other hand, I also understood because another part of the issue was not only that you couldn't show your child on social media or talk about them on social media, but more like it took a year for the adoption to be finalized. I don't know what it's like anywhere else. I don't know if in the States it's different, but I could understand having issue with that, because it's like, if you are adopting a child, obviously the idea is for them to be with you for life. So it is anxiety inducing and potentially troubling to think, you know, for a year, this won't be entirely final. So there's a possibility, I suppose, that the child will not be with you forever. If they find a reason for taking the child away within that year, that would be very traumatic. Once you've bonded, you don't want to separate. So I could understand that being a deal breaker, being like, you know, I don't want the possibility of having my child taken away. That is completely understandable, and I think that's normal. But they seem to put a lot of their preoccupation on the social media aspect, which is why a lot of people were like, is this really what you're worried about? Like, you're adopting a child. You're going to take care of this child for life, basically. And you're worried about not showing them on like Instagram and YouTube for a year? Is that really that big of a deal? Then apparently they also wanted to adopt from Korea, and then they didn't and posted another video explaining that apparently their social media presence might make it difficult or more difficult than average to adopt a child. They decided to not adopt from there. And all of these things are personal choices they are allowed to make. You can decide whatever you want to do in your own private, personal life, as long as it's not hurting anyone. But the thing that people were taking issue with was that it always seemed very social media centric. Like, yes, it might be more difficult, so you're just not going to try. Or yes, you may not be able to show your child on social media for a year, so that just nixes it.
But I think that in general, our agency was very concerned that Korea would not want that kind of attention on their adoption program. Now, I will say I've mentioned this before, we are currently with Holt International, and I have talked to a couple other adoptive moms, including people here on YouTube, like Mel, who adopted from Korea, and they kind of felt like maybe Holt was being a little too, like, what would be the word, like picky? Cautious, there's the word. Like maybe Holt was being a little too cautious, because it wasn't like Korea actually turned us down. It was the director of the Korean program through Holt. But the thing is,
they don't want us to, because the Korea program kind of works differently than the other countries. You pay a lot of money, thousands of dollars up front at the beginning of the process, and they don't want us to go to Korea and then, you know, at the end of it, spending all this money, getting denied. So.
Well, yeah, we could make 2 trips. Like, you have to make 2 trips to Korea.
Yeah,
so we
it could be after the second trip that we get denied. So it'd be like, wow, that was a huge waste of time, just
and money,
gambling on, you know, what they advised us against. So
yeah, and so I think that Holt really wants to make sure that when they've approved someone into a country program, that it's very likely it's going to go through. The other thing is, you know, Mel and Shane, when they started their adoption journey, their channel was at a very different place. It wasn't something that they, to my knowledge, were doing full-time for their work. It was a very different, they were in a very different position on their channel than we are in our channel now. So that was obviously a big point of consideration for them. So we spent a lot of time like thinking about it and praying about it. And, you know, I wasn't sure, like, you know, if we wanted to possibly look at other agencies or what we were going to do about that. But after just really thinking about it, we were like, you know what? We know so many people that have had great adoption experiences through Holt, and we kind of like that they're erring super on the cautious side of life, because exactly, I would have been so upset if we had gotten that far in the process and then turned down. Like, my response would have been like, what about your risk management? Like, how did you guys not see this coming? I would have been
it's not just like the time and and then being rejected. Or no, it is the time rather than the money.
Yes, it's the
like,
time and it's the emotion that would have been attached to that.
2 or 3 years have gone by and we gotta start all over again.
It gave me very much the Stauffer family vibes. Now, if you haven't seen that video, I'll also link that. But there is a channel that is ran by a person called Micah Stauffer. She monetized adopting a child that she then rehomed, which is weird to say. It almost feels like I'm talking about a gift receipt in a return, but she rehomed a child that turned out to have more issues than her and her husband were ready for. And even though they'd been warned, they basically ignored everything. And then after a while, after monetizing the child fully, like going to pick up the child, showing the child's issues, they decided, oh yeah, this is not for us anymore. So we're gonna hand him over to another family. Anyway, aside from all the adoption things, there was actually more that I was not aware of. Like I told you guys in the prior video, this is not my content. I'm not the demographic, so I don't follow this type of content. So then there were a couple of other things that were alarming. So I had seen in comments that she was an anti-vaxxer. So I went to see, is she actually an anti-vaxxer? And she shared some comments about the pandemic and COVID that were very suspicious to me.
Is the thing that I've gotten the most flack on with my channel for the last 6 months or whatever, and that is masking. And I know a lot of people have said, like, has your opinion changed on how you feel about masks as everything has gone on? And I'm just like, I'm kind of just sitting over here thinking, did people, like, maybe I don't remember what I said, but my thought is, did people hear what I said? Because of course my thoughts haven't changed. I said in that video that I'm very sad about the state that we're in. I'm very sad about my child going out and seeing masked faces. We're traveling next week and I'm not excited to even wear a mask around Logan because I mentioned this in that video. Like, we just don't go out to many places ever, where we have to wear a mask. We try to stay outside and stay spaced out and all of that jazz. And it's fine. It is what it is. But when I responded the first time to the Q&A, that was kind of where my thought went, was I was like, I bet they're talking about masks and maybe they're talking about vaccinations too. And at this point, no, my opinions have not changed. And I don't foresee any comments changing my opinion. And so that's the thing. We go back to the beginning about time could change my opinion. Sorry, I want to pause and go back. Time could change my opinion. More information could change my opinion. And I think sometimes that's why people want to leave certain things in comments, but I've never been left information regarding those things that has peeled back my eyes and made me be like, wow. Because here's the thing. You don't know what you don't know. And that goes for everyone, right? So someone that might be mad at me and leaving a comment doesn't know what they don't know that I might know, but vice versa. So of course my opinions could change over time. Of course someone could present something that makes me be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. But at this point, that's not happening very often. And, everything going on is so sad for so many reasons. And I think the other thing I want to back up to about the whole controversial thing, and I probably have even used the word supposedly 4 times in this video. A lot of people were upset with me that I, use the word supposedly when we're talking about things going on in the world with the illness that's going around. And I just want to say what I said back then, which was that I use the word supposedly, like that YouTube video of that little boy, where I think they call him the supposedly little boy. And when he's talking, he's like, supposedly, there was supposedly another person that supposedly, and it's a joke in my life that I talk that way. I have grappled with the idea of gossip since I was a little girl, because gossip, I remember thinking this through as a child. I'm like, that is a granular thing, if that's the right word, but then it also is a big scale thing, like the game of telephone, just gossip in general. And I have wondered for my whole life what that even means, but I have seen throughout my whole life that people lie. People change stories. Sometimes people just see something and then tell it differently than it really is. And that's not referring to the way I used supposedly in that video regarding the people that have passed away. I just mean it in regards to, when you're dealing with the whole world and one situation, one giant situation, and when doctors are being, silenced that have different opinions versus the previous model of, medicine in the US, which is, you get an opinion, you can go get a second opinion. Well, secondary opinions are being squashed right now. And I just think that just like the game of telephone, how there's a lot of people involved in relaying information, I think it's pretty easy for things to get confused, relayed in the wrong way, misspoken. I think that there's a lot going on.
Namely, she said the fact that, anti-vaxxers were called crazy meant that you just hadn't done enough research.
You are comfortable, your thoughts on vaccination. Okay, this will be quick. You don't need to call me an anti-vaxxer, because once again, with that binary, people love to put you in one or the other. So we don't need to call me an anti-vaxxer, but at the same time, if you wanted to call me an anti-vaxxer, you could go ahead and do that. I know a lot of people think that those people are crazy. My personal belief is that if you think those people are crazy, you haven't gone down the wormhole enough. And I hate when people say this, but you haven't, quote, done enough research, which I don't mean that as an insult. If you're super pro-vaccine, I don't mean do your research and then you'll find out, because you could do your research and totally disagree. That's actually my biggest qualm with people's sentences in general of do your research. It's well, we could read the same things and come to a different conclusion. Anyways, I think that the concerns are valid. If you've never looked up a man named Del Bigtree, kind of good luck, because he's being censored all over the internet. But if you've never looked him up, I highly recommend it. And if you're going to tell me that you've seen a couple of clips of his, I don't do well with that. When people go yeah, I've seen clips of whatever it is we're talking about. It could be anything. And they've never seen a full presentation from someone on whatever topic. I'm really bothered by that. So if you have seen a couple of clips from Del Bigtree and you didn't like it, but you've never watched his full presentations, don't comment. That's so dramatic. But it's true, because he is impeccable with his sources. He gives original sources, government documentation. He's being censored, in my opinion, because he has a different opinion than what some of the large medical establishments are saying. But also, I'm one of those people that feels well, of course, research is very much dictated by money and funding.
Then the last thing I want to close this video on was something that I thought was curious to me. So she mentioned in a video that she had been going to therapy with a Christian therapist, and with that, there's nothing wrong. Honestly, I did agree with her on one point, saying that I think that pretty much everyone should go to therapy, because there are things you want to discuss, even without trauma. There are things you might want to discuss with an outsider who can give you an outside perspective. But she then goes into this marriage advice, I suppose, where apparently her therapist, and this was difficult for me to believe, so I don't know how much I believe, but apparently her therapist basically told her to give her husband the silent treatment. And when I say silent treatment, it meant not talking to him. So she got home that day after that therapy session and apparently just told her husband, Dan, oh, I'm not getting what I want from our relationship. And this was 9 years in, by the way. And she claimed that she didn't know him how she wanted to know him, which you'd think would be an issue that would come up before 9 years. She just decided she was not going to talk to him anymore because she had requested for certain changes to be made in the relationship. And apparently he was not making said changes, and so the therapist said basically stop talking to him. And apparently she did that for 2 weeks.
I literally think everybody should have a therapist. That's not me pushing things onto people, although I guess that is what I'm doing. It's just been amazing to get counsel back from someone who studies human nature for a living. I feel like I'm able to get a good, honest reflection of what's going on. Anyways, I was in therapy about a year ago, and I had this realization, this is gonna be a real big realization, obviously it was a buildup, that how do I word this? That I didn't know my husband the way I wanted to know my husband. I realized that a lot of our communication and a lot of what was making me sad was feeling like everything I knew of my husband, or a lot of the times what I knew of my husband, were facts were stories that were told to me, were manly things he would want to tell me about, not the things that I wanted to know about him, how he felt about something. So I was in this session and my counselor basically said to me, like, well, you've talked and talked and talked and talked. Have you tried not talking? And I was like, what do you mean not talking? And she was like, just what I said, not talking. And I'm actually really hesitant to share this on the internet because obviously you guys are getting just a small slice of my life and the situation and how it unfolded. But I'm hoping, on a side note, that if there's any way for God to work through my words, but like beyond whatever dumb things I may say, that's what I'm hoping. Because this year has really been transformative. So she said to me, have you tried not talking? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, just that, not talking. And she was like, you've told him over and over and over. And yes, he's showing you that he seems to care because he was never like, whatever. Like, if you've seen Dan, like, you could probably imagine, he's like such a nice, loving, loyal, caring human, but he would care in the moment. And then the things that I wanted to change were not changing. And so basically she told me, if you kind of go quiet basically, and you decide I'm not going to talk until these issues are settled, he will start to settle them. And I was like, well, don't I need to like tell him before I go silent? Like, I'm going silent because of X, Y, and Z. And she was like, nope. And I was like, why? That's crazy. He's gonna be like, hello? And she was like, nope, you've talked to him enough. He will know. And I remember being like, what? That's crazy. Like, yeah, I've talked to him a bunch, but how would he just know? And she said, all you need to say to him is there are issues within our relationship that I'm really sad that we have not been able to deal with and that I don't feel you've really tried to fix. So I need to just be quiet for a minute and think by myself, something like that. I'm making up those sentences. I didn't talk to him for 2 weeks. In the mix of that, we were still working together. We were still shooting things. There were days where other people would show up to the house and we would film as a group. And he, I think, was confused and thought, oh, Nikki's fine now. Like, whatever, she's let it go. But it wasn't about that. It was a commitment to caring more about changing our relationship than how I was making him feel, even though I can't make him feel anything, how I was making him feel that day. Doing that silence was really hard because I felt like I was hurting him. And I remember my therapist told me, she basically exactly what I just said to you. She was like, no, like basically you need to grow up and calm down. Like you're just silent for a minute. Like it's okay. You have a long life ahead of you. And B, do you care about changing your relationship? Because she basically told me if you keep things, I don't know what the word is, sedentary, you don't strive for that growth, then like things are just gonna decay and get worse. Like you have to deal with things. So fast forward, yeah, we didn't talk for 2 weeks at all. I never said anything back to him unless we were in a group working on a project. And that was obviously really, 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 really frustrating for him. It was really hard for me.
Like I said, it's their own relationship. I don't even know why that was put online, frankly. It feels a little extra to put online something so private, but it hit me as very strange because for me, communication is the number one thing in any relationship, whether it's a friendship, a marriage, or a boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. And to kind of advocate for just like not talking through things seemed very strange to me, but apparently their relationship became stronger than it was before, so good for them. But it also hit me as very strange that a therapist would recommend that, considering that there were obvious problems of communication. As Nikki had said, she wasn't getting what she wanted. So not talking about it to me seemed counterintuitive. And then it also seemed, in my opinion, kind of passive aggressive, really, because putting your own partner in that kind of state, I would be extremely anxious if my husband just came home and stopped talking to me for like 2 weeks, and just like anytime I asked them, you know, what can I do, blah, 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 they just wouldn't respond. That would not be a healthy headspace for me. So I also wonder what the thought process was in terms of like, okay, we know how this is supposed to help Nikki, but what about Dan? Like, as much as he may have been the one not changing enough or not doing enough, whatever the case may be, does anyone really deserve to be put in that kind of headspace in their own home for 2 weeks in order to make a point or a change? Very weird. Anyways, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.